Welcome to Temple Beth-El. I'm Rabbi Michael Fessler, and we're gathered together this afternoon to mourn the passing of Robert Levine and to honor his life. Robert was someone who measured success not only by professional milestones or worldly accomplishments, though they were of course substantial, but by the lives that he touched, the support he gave, the example he set, and the difference he made along the way. The people who have gathered this morning are a testament to your affection and gratitude towards Robert. You know him from many different aspects of his life. He touched your lives in many different ways. We've come together to give comfort to his loved ones, to remember him, and ultimately to accompany him to his final resting place on earth. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. And the time of mourning is a complicated one. It's filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We'll begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers linking the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people of Israel and God's eternity with Robert's life. From Psalm 15, speaking of the value of a life lived with integrity. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai mi yagur bo alecha, mi yishkon behar kodshecha. A psalm of David. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? Live with integrity. Do what is right, speak the truth without deceit. Have no slander upon your tongue. Do no evil to others. Spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere Adonai. Do not mistreat your neighbor. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates, accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own, then shall you stand firm forever. Karov Adonai l'nishbarei lev v'deka'ei ruach Yoshia. Adonai is close to the brokenhearted and helps those crushed in spirit. From Psalm 39, tell us, Eternal, what our term is. Tell us the measure of our days. Were we to know, we would know then certainly how fleeting life is, how quickly we gray. You have made our life just handbreadths long. Its span is as nothing in your sight. No one endures any longer than a breath. We walk about as mere shadow. Mere futility is our hustle and bustle, amassing treasure and not knowing who will gather in. What then can we depend on, Adonai? We shall depend on you. In you lies our hope. Continue with the 23rd Psalm. First in English, I'll be using a familiar translation, and if you're familiar with it, please feel to join in. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai rohi lo echsar, binat asher yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yanaleni. Nafshi eshovev, Nafshi eshovev, yancheni b'maglei tzedek l'man shemo. Gam ki elech begetz mavet, lo irav ki ata imadi shiftecha. ומשענתך, שבטך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן, תערוך לפני שולחן, תערוך לפני שולחן, נגד צוררי. דשנת ושמן ראשי, דשנת ושמן ראשי, דשנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב החסד ירדפו בי כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. So I'd like to invite up Dr. Bruce Chipkin to share some thoughts and memories about Robert.
I'll apologize in advance for the length of this eulogy, but it's really hard to sum up Robert Levine in a short couple of paragraphs. Family, friends, colleagues, golfing accomplices. Standing before you today, I am deeply moved and incredibly honored to speak on behalf of my dear friend who has touched so many lives in profound ways. Being asked to deliver this eulogy is a massive responsibility, one that I accept with a heart full of both gratitude and sorrow. This amazing gathering here is really a testament to the impact that our friend Robert had on each of us, and quite frankly, this entire community. One of the most remarkable qualities our dear friend had was his unwavering commitment to the community. Robert and Sarah both generously and selflessly donated countless hours to charitable causes, executive boards, hospital boards, planning boards, always putting others before themselves. Their dedication to our community will always be a shining example of what it means to truly care for and cherish those around you. And Robert's legacy of kindness and service, I'm sure, will continue to inspire all of us. I'm humbled and privileged to share my reflections on a life so richly lived and deeply cherished. Robert Stephen Levine was one of the first people I met when my wife Megan and I moved to our new adopted hometown, Poughkeepsie, New York. A chance meeting at our first property closing, Robert and I quickly and organically became close friends and golfing confidants. And when I mean confidants, I mean we had a pact that our performances on the links would be kept just between the two of us, save for those very rare, memorable shots. Early in our friendship, as I became a bit more comfortable, I started to call him Bobby. He let me know, in his formal style and attention to protocol, that he was only to be referred to as Robert. I, of course, continued to call him Bobby, realizing the futility of his efforts with his boorish new pal, he started calling me Brucey, knowing fully that that name bothered me as well. Despite the name calling, we really did have a love relationship. I loved Robert, and he loved golf. Not a classic love friendship, but close enough, I guess. As close as our friendship was, Robert and I developed this interesting professional relationship. I sort of became his pharmaceutical supplier, a little something for sleep and a little something to maintain that beautiful flowing salt and pepper hair which was mostly natural. I'm sure Robert would want me to tell you that. And he became our trusted legal advisor. His legal counsel often went above and beyond the call of duty. One example that really stands out took place at a court hearing for one of my many traffic violations. That wasn't supposed to be funny. Being the ever-concerned fatherly figure, Robert insisted on being there on my behalf. I insisted that I had everything under control. Robert knew better. Just as Robert had suspected, his arrogant friend failed to read the fine print on his summons and showed up to court in his flamboyant, wrinkled shorts. Strictly prohibited in a court of law, of course. Robert took one look at my attire and gave me that paternal look of disappointment that I had come to expect from him. He said, "Brucey, come with me." As luck would have it, he had a pair of slacks in his car that were destined for dry cleaning, and he sent me to the men's room to change into them. Turns out his pants fit me only slightly longer than my golf shorts. And they actually looked like Payne Stewart knickers. But they passed with the judge, who was a friend of Robert's and myself, and my friend Bobby saved my behind once again. And he loved to remind me of that special moment. But that was one of the things that made Robert so special. Although he had no biological children, he was a sage, fatherly figure to so many, always leaving a profound impact with his wisdom, kindness, and infectious personality. He was a mentor, a confidant, and a source of strength, leaving an indelible mark on the hearts of both young and old. And he reminded us that family is not just about blood, but about the bonds we create through love and compassion. In reflecting on Robert's life, one cannot overlook the profound and cherished bond he shared with his parents, Cecily and Herman. Their unwavering support and love formed the cornerstone of his character, shaping him into the remarkable person we all knew and loved. I was fortunate enough to know Cecily and Herman for a few years. It didn't take long to realize how much Robert loved and appreciated the lessons and values imparted by his parents and how they guided him through life's challenges and triumphs. I often told Robert how jealous I was of the unique bond he had with Herman. As a father and son, their devotion was unwavering. As friends, they were forever supportive. And as law partners, they had a mutual respect and admiration, inspiring each other to build one of the most successful law practices in the county. And from Cecily, I love that after his many trips back to England with her, he carried forward that two-cheek kiss of European formality and protocol for everyone he met. Both his parents' influences were self-evident in his kindness, integrity, and respect for family. To Mary Ann, Eric, and Holly, you were never just in-laws to Robert. You were dear friends and a cherished part of his life. I heard of the many wonderful vacation weeks you spent together in Florida, creating memories that I'm sure all of you and Sarah will forever hold close to your hearts. And despite some minor political differences, Mary Ann, Robert truly loved and respected you like you were his second mom, proving that love is thicker than blue and red. To his many friends and office colleagues, too many to mention here, honestly, you weren't just part of his everyday professional and recreational life, you were part of his extended family. He told me on multiple occasions that he could not have been the man and successful professional he was without the love, support, and trust he was so fortunate to receive from each of you. To Barbara, Suzanne, Dale, Nikki, Bob, Megan, John, Sue, and so many others, what can I say? You were his sisters, you were his brothers, you were in the trenches with him. You kept him grounded, focused, supported, and were indispensable to taking Herman and Robert's vision to the next level. I know Robert's absence will be deeply felt by everyone at Levine and Levine. And to the Quinns, O'Donnells, Dombers, Ortegas, Tinkelmans, Loises, Dysons, Mim, just so many more families, just too many to mention here. many that weren't a part of our circle, but no less important to Robert. Again, what can I say? I'm sure each one of you have a treasure trove of stories and memories that would truly capture his spirit and keep us entertained for hours and hours. And each one of you will remember and honor Robert in your own special way. Despite the many miles that separated them, Robert's close relationship with his brother Richard was really a remarkable testament to the strength of those early family ties, spirituality, and power of love their parents modeled for them as children. No distance was too great for the connection that they shared. It was always so obvious, Richard, how proud Robert was to call you brother. He always boasted about your accomplishments and really looked forward to the next holiday or milestone to visit the West Coast and catch up on the exciting lives of his niece Tamar, nephew Jeremy, and sister-in-law Jacqueline. It is impossible to adequately describe the immense pride he had for you guys. His face would literally light up with joy whenever he spoke of your many triumphs and accomplishments. And it was clear that he cherished you two, Tamar and Jeremy, like you were his own children. Richard, even though your families lived on opposite sides of the country, your hearts were always close. It was truly inspiring to see how deeply dedicated you were to your brother, but especially when he needed it most. And I can only imagine how comforting it was for him to have you there in his final days. You know, for centuries, pundits and philosophers have loved to talk about the influence that the forces of destiny and fate play in forming our experiences and our relationships. And at times, it can be interesting academic conversation. But incredibly, right here in our very own small community, we have actually all borne witness to one of the most beautiful acts of fate and destiny. And I truly believe that Robert was waiting patiently all those years for fate and destiny to conspire to create one of the most beautiful love stories ever shared. Robert adored and worshiped his long-awaited soulmate, Sarah. She was his queen. Their love was profound and it was enduring, a beacon of hope and joy that touched all of us who knew them. In the short 20 years they shared together, they built a beautiful life, one filled with numerous friendships, laughter, mutual respect, and boundless love. And Sarah, I will forever remember the way Robert called you by that familiar dear, even when things weren't going exactly how he wanted. But that was Robert, always sweet, always patient, and always, always a gentleman. It was obvious that he felt the same sweet patience and eternal love from you, Sarah. There are countless ways I would like to remember Robert, but some of the most cherished ones are those we spent together on the golf course. It was our sanctuary, our comedy store, our no judgment zone, and I'm hoping many of you here today will choose to remember Robert in this very, very familiar scenario. I'm standing on the first tee at Dutchess Golf and Country Club, 3 minutes until our tee time, anxiously wondering where my favorite golf partner is, again. Then I see him walking from the parking lot as briskly as he can while saddled with a 20-pound golf bag on his shoulder. He reaches the tee, out of breath, with 1 minute to spare. He straps his bag to the back of the cart. Not a word is spoken. I tee off quickly so as not to hold up the group behind us. Without a practice swing, having just raced from the car, Mr. Levine laces the drive down the middle of the fairway. We both jump in our shared cart and drive towards our tee shots. Late night, Bobby? Brucey, you have no idea. I had to go to this charity event, and then after that to a hospital fundraiser. I didn't get home till midnight, and then my alarm, you don't want to know. He continues to fetch and drop some names from last night's festivities, as only Robert could do, and he finishes his diatribe in classic Robert style. But Brucey, it was really, really terrific. We have our usual laughs, take part in our customary banter and shot busting, catch up on our families and the week's events. We hit some decent shots, some forgettable shots, and then we arrive at the 14th tee. For those of you not familiar with this hole, it presented one of the more daunting and difficult tee shots in Dutchess County. The 14th hole was a sharp dogleg to the right. There was a huge pond in front that needed to be carried with very tall trees guarding the right side of the fairway, trees beyond the fairway if you hit it too far straight, trees to the left, very intimidating. Your reasonable choices, if you're a right-handed amateur golfer, are to hit a risky 250-yard fade around the trees or to hit a wimpy 180 to 200-yard straight shot to a deep valley. And that wimpy route also left you a blind 200-yard shot after that. I, of course, have the honors on the tee because this is my dream and because I bested Robert on the previous hole. I proceed to hit my usual safe, boring bailout drive into that bowl. I'm over the water, but it's an embarrassing display. Without hesitation, Robert pulls his driver out, tees up his Titleist, takes one practice swing, and proceeds to hit his signature sweeping right to left, towering an aggressive drive over the bulk of the pond and above the massive tree line. Neither of us can see if his ball is safely in the fairway due to the blinding line of trees. We hop in the cart again. No words are spoken. The anticipation is deafening. After I hit my unremarkable second shot, we begin our ascent to the top of the bowl. Robert's salt and pepper hair blowing in the summer breeze like it used to do so many times. And there it is. We see it, his tee ball sitting in the middle of the fairway, less than 100 yards from the green. I glanced at him. Robert, are you kidding me? And he looks at me and gives me that sheepish grin that I was so accustomed to receiving after mind-boggling shots like that one. It's really irrelevant what Robert does on his second shot, because that tee shot is the shining metaphor for the way Robert Levine lived his life. Bold, daring, exciting, and no regrets. Nice drive, Bobby. Job well done, pal.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to call on Rob Dyson.
It's difficult to sum up Robert's life of 75 years or our friendship of 50. I met Robert through his father, Herman Levine. And incidentally, I rarely called him Herman. Robert and I were contemporaries, beginning our careers, and we learned from one another. Both of us were evolving our membership in the community. Robert was proudly a product of the Mid-Hudson Valley, and we're fortunate that he returned here after law school. He joined his father in the family legal business, and it's equally fortunate that he never left. Robert became wired into the community at all levels. He was a model of what civic leadership looks like if you care about your community as much as he did. Here's a sample of a few of the projects that he was a guiding force. Robert did all of the legal work and advisory work to acquire the facility for the Family Partnership Center. This transaction transformed the old Poughkeepsie High School into the most vibrant and active center for nonprofit organizations providing various social programs under one roof in the state of New York. Mass Design, a not-for-profit architectural and urban planning organization, was created by our own Michael Murphy, also a child of the Hudson Valley, while he was a Harvard grad student. Robert gave him the guidance and helped set up the project. He did all the legal documentation that was required to get this important and visionary organization up and running. Additionally, he also served on the board during their early years. Robert helped a lot of people, and you would never hear about it. He deserves special appreciation for his 10-year term as planning board chair in the city of Poughkeepsie, which is clearly the most public demonstration of his core commitment to the community. His fingerprints are all over this area. He was intelligent, and I always sought his legal and business acumen. He listened, one of the best listeners I've ever experienced. If you knew Robert, you remembered him. He was a gift to all of us. To his wife Sarah, his brother Richard, and his wife Jacqueline, to Tamara, to Jeremy and his wife Michelle, and your beautiful grandnieces, our deepest, deepest condolences.
All right, next I'd like to call on Robert's brother, Richard.
We really shouldn't be here today. You know, I don't want to be here. You know, cancer sucks. And this is one of the horrible things that it's done to, as it has affected many of us. Last time I was here was the funeral of my father. Before that, the funeral of my mother. And, well, I guess life goes on. I want to thank everybody for being here today. I only wish Robert could be here and feel the love. He would be truly, truly, truly humbled. He loved everybody in this town. I spent the most part of the last 6 weeks at his bedside with Sarah. And as horrific as it was as an experience, some good things came out of it. One was to witness firsthand a superhero in Sarah. That woman wears a cape. She spent 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, on top of everybody. She is a leader. She made sure everything was done for Robert. And then she learned the nuances of the medicalese, and she talked to the doctors. They came in and they knew they had to be at top of their game because they were going to be dealing with Sarah. Most importantly, she was always in Robert's ear. She was constantly filling him up with comfort, with hope, and with love. That man died knowing he was loved. Robert loved Sarah so much. I mean, I was bored, actually, by how many times he told me that. He would end, if Sarah wasn't on the phone, every conversation would end with, "I am the luckiest man in the world. I don't know what I would do without her." The second thing that I benefited from those 6 weeks was to reminisce with Robert. And he was really in the mood to talk and to think. He reminded me of a story. When we were little boys, we lived just not far from here on Yates Boulevard. And for those of you old enough to have been in Poughkeepsie in the 50s, they used to have these little kerosene lamps that they would put in the street around street construction to keep it safe. And one morning, Robert and I were out in the middle of the street burning leaves on the kerosene lamps. I was all but 4, 5 at the most. Robert might have been 7. And we had quite a good fire going, I remember. And all of a sudden, there's 2 doors slam, and there what appeared to be these huge policemen looking down at us, very displeased of what we were doing. Without blinking, Robert grabbed my hand, pulled me behind his back, and stood between me and the policeman. What 7-year-old does that? Not too many years after that, I was in the 4th grade. Robert was in the 6th. We were just 2 blocks from here at Krieger School. I didn't think Robert was around, and I was playing baseball with a bunch of bigger kids. I was terrible at baseball. And for some reason I don't remember, and maybe I never knew, some kid came over and whacked me in the head with the bat. Seemingly out of nowhere, just out of the sky, Robert appeared. And he put me comfortably on the ground. He took his t-shirt off, he put it on my head, and he went seeking revenge, chasing after the kid with the bat. Kid had a bat, Robert didn't have one. He didn't care. He was taking care of me. Not that many years after that, when I was about 13, Robert was 15. Robert already knew at 15 he was going to be a lawyer. I mean, how many kids want to be a lawyer when they're 15? And just very casually, he says to me one day, "You know, Richard, you're going to be able to leave and do whatever you want because I'm going to stay here and take care of our parents." At 15, he was giving me the freedom to do what I wanted to do in life, which was, who knows, at 13. Just so, and he was going to take on that responsibility. And damn, 27 years later, I moved to California with my family. My parents are old, and Robert is taking care of them. I mean, he took care of them like nobody could take care of anybody. "27 years after that, Robert and I are sitting in this very pew at our father's funeral. We're both broken up, but me as the baby brother was a little bit more broken up. And Robert put his arm around me and says, "Don't worry, Richard." He says, "I got your back." This was the beauty of that man. It didn't matter if you were a relative or a friend or a business person, certainly people he worked with who he loved so much. He had your back. He cared. It wasn't because he was a lawyer. It wasn't because he was getting paid. It was in his DNA. And that's the man we've lost. I'm not a very religious person, but there's always been something about funerals that I've really respected. There's something wonderful and resonant when a community comes together to bury its dead. I know Robert would be very appreciative of us all joining in today to be with him, sharing our respect for him and, of course, our love. And I'd like to say something else, and I think I'm channeling Robert now. Both Robert and I had very serious health conditions over the last 6 months. And we were two guys that were going to live to be 93. We were healthy, especially Robert. So what I'd like to just say is, if you're healthy, don't take it for granted and get checked up. Take care of yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you to each of you who have spoken and shared who Robert was to you and to this community. In learning more about Robert's history, we knew that Robert was at home in the Hudson Valley, third-generation Poughkeepsie resident and proud of it. And I learned a little bit more about his family, talking with Richard and Sarah yesterday. He came from humble beginnings. His grandparents, Nathan and Lena, were born in Pinsk in Eastern Europe. They met in New York. And he was a dry goods salesman, and she was a seamstress. And he had a horse and buggy and sold pots and pans from here to Saugerties. And he would also take orders for clothing along the way. He'd come back, he'd give the orders to Lena, and she would make the garments, then he would deliver them on his next pass. And in one of those classic stories of generations of immigrants doing better and better and establishing themselves in the community. Their children, Molly and Herman and Doris, were all brilliant, all hard workers. Molly and Doris both attended Vassar College. Molly was the valedictorian, as a Jewish woman and daughter of a peddler and seamstress in the 20s. They married, respectively, a doctor and an engineer, and in more enlightened times, I suspect they would have been the doctor and the engineer. And Herman was the middle child, Robert's father, born in 1911. And he overcame this humble background. He became a lawyer at age 21. He practiced law here in Poughkeepsie. He was a hardworking lawyer. He built a solid practice with integrity. And he gave back to the community. He served on the New York State Board of Legal Ethics, on the Commission for Urban Renewal here in the city. He was the chair of the local chapter of the Anti-Defamation League in the 60s and active in their civil rights work. And he would continue to practice law for 71 years until his death at age 92, an age where he was still walking a full golf course and doing 3 closings a day afterwards. And his father's qualities were models for Robert. And Richard, you told me the story about how from his very early age, I think you said 15, that he was clear he was going to follow in your dad's footsteps, and that's what he was going to do. You did tell me also he was doing title searches in his father's company at age 15. That was his entree. And I think only someone who was destined for the law would have enjoyed doing title searches at age 15. And he built a small shop into a large and thriving practice, Levine and Levine. And some lawyers are attracted to the law out of killer instinct, a desire to compete and win and best other people. You'd be shocked to hear this, I'm sure. And Robert was not that kind of lawyer. He found great meaning in taking care of people at important junctures of their lives, helping them navigate big decisions and achieve their dreams. He genuinely wanted the best for people. He treasured relationships, he treasured connections. And for him, the ultimate bottom line was not just a number on a balance sheet. His true bottom line was about care and fairness and respect and generosity. Others have already spoken about his love for the Hudson Valley and his pride in it. He delighted taking people to his favorite hikes and restaurants, out-of-the-way spots, tremendous civic pride and this joy in showing people his discoveries so that he could share them. And with his love of the community came his desire to help it prosper and serve its residents. He made it his business to give back. He was a supporter of so many charitable organizations that touch all of our lives who live in this area. And I have an extremely partial list. Medical institutions like Vassar Brothers Hospital and the Hospice Foundation, local arts organizations like the Hudson Valley Film Council and the Bardavon, civic life, the Walkway Over the Hudson, the Poughkeepsie Farm Project, Day One Early Learning Community, and on and on. His work on the planning board in the city reflected his deep commitment to the welfare and prosperity of his home, the community he loved so much, into which his roots were so deeply embedded. Sarah, when you and I spoke about Robert, you were so clear about the things that brought you together. You met as firmly established adults. He was 50, you were 40, and you grew up in Poughkeepsie, but had made your career in California for many years, and you were newly relocated back to New York City, and you came back up to Poughkeepsie to visit your mom for the summer. And as striking testimonial for the power of healthy habits, you joined Mike Ortega, where Sandy Ortega set you and Steve and Robert up. And on your first date, the connection was clear. His vibrancy, his dry sense of humor, his generosity of spirit, his sense of adventure, the value he placed on service and giving back. And as that relationship developed and you finally announced your engagement, you told me he called his office manager that day and learned that the phone at the law office had been ringing off the hook because no one could believe the most eligible bachelor in Poughkeepsie was off the market. You were married in a small ceremony in California in 2007, a clever scheme to avoid having to invite the entire city of Poughkeepsie to your wedding. And you've been together as partners and companions and best friends for 25 years. You shared common goals and passions, love for one another. And the recent turn in his illness was a true shocker. He was extraordinarily physically fit. He had every reason to think that he would follow in his father's footsteps and go out strong at the age of 92, but it was not to be. And even in the most recent couple of months in his struggle with his final illness, you told me how you would be frustrated that he would be focused on taking care of others and making sure they were okay when you were really clear he needed to be taking care of himself. But he was who he was. And it was important to him that he get others' affairs in order as well as his own. I think for him, the closure meant doing the best he could to set others up to do well. We were also grateful he was able to take that time to renew and strengthen important connections with friends and family. In the Jewish tradition, in the annual cycle of scriptural reading, we're reading this week from the book of Numbers, and in it, we read about the death of Aaron, the brother of Moses. Moses needs no introduction. He's painted in the Hebrew Bible as a passionate advocate, a leader, confronting Pharaoh, boldly interceding with God, on the people's behalf, and Aaron, his brother, was not the same personality. Aaron was the high priest, and his job was to build and sustain community. A passage in the Talmud urges us to emulate Aaron, to be of the disciples of Aaron. How? To be rodef shalom ubakesh shalom, to seek peace and pursue it, and to do so out of love. And the Hebrew word for peace, shalom, comes from a word meaning wholeness, completion. And different people can reach that in different ways. Aaron didn't want everyone to be the same. He wanted everyone to reach the full fruition of who they could be. There are stories in the Jewish tradition about how Aaron would learn about conflict between two people and find creative ways to bring them together and reconcile. And at the end of this week's Torah reading, when Aaron dies, the community grinds to a halt. They stop their journey through the wilderness to mourn for 30 days. Because they knew that his concern and care for the community and its well-being was central to his character, and that his loss was a loss for them all. The same is true for Robert. Robert Levine lived with a generosity of spirit that moved him to give back to the city and community he loved so much and to see them prosper. When he experienced moments of delight, his impulse was always to share them with others. He lived a life not just of achievement, but of meaning. His loss is a loss not only for those who knew him and loved him personally, but for the entire community, to which he gave of his time and his expertise, his resources and energy, whether they knew it or not. He touched their lives and he made a difference every day. His memory will be a blessing. Take a few moments for private prayer and contemplation. So I'd like to ask those who are able to rise at this point for the memorial prayer. El malei rachamim, shochem bamromim, hamtzei menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina, b'malot kedoshim u'tohorim, כזוהר הקיים מזהירים את נשמת שלמה בן חיים ושרה שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים הסתירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בצרור חיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר Amen. El Malei Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, the soul of Robert Levine, Shlomo ben Chaim Vesara, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace, and we say, Amen. El Shaddai, Almighty God of the living and the dead, send comfort to your children who grieve. Overcome by the pain of loss, help them to focus on the triumph and joy in Robert's life. Help them to meet grief with courage, to face sorrow undaunted, to treasure what is now theirs because Robert has lived. Should despair threaten or faith falter, sustain us all, God, for you are our refuge and strength, our ever-present help in troubled times, and let us say, Amen. So I'd like to ask the pallbearers to come forward. We'll be proceeding from here to burial at the Temple Beth-El Cemetery on Route 44. And I've been asked to share that the family will be holding a memorial service in the coming months, and look out for notice about that.